Happy Wednesday if you're listening on Women Seeking Wholeness Wednesday. I'm Cherie Burton, and this is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they truly are. Today is kind of a follow-up episode to the wildly popular episode 87, where I interviewed sisters Sarah Scheme and Mindy DeGraffenreid about heavens aligning for big planetary shifts. We've seen a lot of things happening in 2020, and it just so happens the heavenly maps foretold this. It was literally written in the stars, and I'm not talking about predestination. I'm talking about, things move and shift according to the constellations, according to what is aligned in which houses. And this is just a new fascination of mine, but I've always been kind of interested in it lately. It's just, almost undeniable as a science. So this follow-up episode is with Tara Jade Nichols. She is an evolutionary astrologer, and she's talking today about the interesting things we have on the horizon as 2020 is kind of coming to a close. So we're talking, mid to end of November through end of December, coming into 2021. So more and more people are going to be waking up as these old forms and structures break down. And interestingly enough, we can actually see that happening in these astrology charts. So super fascinating to me as of late, especially just diving into how does this affect our behavior? How does it affect us on the subtle level, on the energy body level? So you can find Tara on tarajadeNichols.com, and I've done some personal work with her, and I just think she's a wealth of information. Also join our discussion on Women Seeking Wholeness Facebook group. Ask to join kind of as we head into our 100th episode in about 4 weeks. I'm actually going to be giving away a free coaching session, all of the rules and regs and everything related to that, as well as entrance into my Stand, Speak, Shine school. So I'm giving away 3 biggies. And you can find all of that in the Women Seeking Wholeness Facebook group. And without any further ado, let's bring on Tara Jade Nichols. Well, Tara, I'm so appreciative that you are you accepted my invitation after I did a session with you to be on my podcast, because you have so much wisdom about astrology. It's mind blowing.
Thank you. It's definitely a passion of mine, and has been for many, many years, and just something I felt called to, and something that I was kind of actually guided to by some of astrologers that I had received readings from, and they both just kind of told me that this is something I did in a past life, and so that I would pick it up very easily. And one of them actually became my mentor, and I studied, with her very closely. I was a student of hers for about 2 or 3 years before I started finally giving readings. So it's been a journey, and it's been a process, but it's something that I definitely feel called to do.
That's amazing. Yeah. I think your work finds you, don't you? I think Absolutely. Your soul work finds you. You really don't have to scout that heavily. It's going to find you if it's meant to.
Absolutely. And it's the thing, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and so it's kind of brought out in front of you on a silver platter, and it's take it or leave it. But it's kind of that opportunity, I think, to jump forward into, your passion and something you were meant to do, and something that, you can feel your soul kind of pulling you in that direction.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of start there, because we did an episode 87 with Mindy DeGraffenreid and her sister Sarah Scheme, and they gave, they call it this trifecta thing that they talk about, and then how we're all feeling it this year. And I got a big response to that. People were messaging me about that episode, and I think people are really more of a mass understanding or a mass consciousness now of it's not really that weird anymore. I mean, you can go pretty woo, right? I'm woo anyway, but I love the science too. There's science to this. And, but I think more people are seeing that this is not a pseudo thing, that you'll have the occasional, imposters or people that are posing as experts, astrologists or whatever, and that's okay. If it's their hobby, that's great. But there's an actual art and science to this. So I want to go there. But first, and I do want to talk about what's happening the rest of the year, but I want to know how, I mean, you said you got a session from someone, but how did this develop for you? Like, what was your journey to just get you into really, really stepping in and really diving deep into this?
Well, I think, from an early age, 23, 24, I went to, I packed up my car and my belongings and moved to LA to study yoga. And I think from the beginning, at a very young age, I just kind of had this desire for self-healing and self-discovery and self-understanding. And so it's kind of like I went out on a little, I went on this whole path of trying to understand, who I am and really look at, wounds, which a lot of them do come from our family, and, from our early childhood life, and really sit with them and not run away from them. And so, yoga was that first adventure into that healing body, mind, and spirit. And, through many different courses from tarot to reading the Akashic records to studying, becoming a shamanic practitioner, and eventually led me to astrology, which has been, I think the thing that really pulls me the most. But I think in the end, it's like, what does it take for my soul to evolve? And I feel like I've gotten a lot of the answers that I've been seeking through astrology, understanding what my core wound, which mine personally has to do with knowing my worth, learning to value myself, learning self-love, because my Chiron is in Taurus. So a piece of that has, it just made sense. And it just is kind of like that aha moment of just feeling very validated the more and more I kind of sink deeper into this whole world of astrology, which there is so much to explore.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah. I think that so much is written in literally written in the stars. Like we're so at one with the way things move in the heavens, if you will, and how it impacts our work here in the world. And I'm starting to learn that myself. You just threw out this like truth bomb word, Akashic records, and I'm familiar with that. But for people who aren't, can you explain? I mean, we all have different belief systems, so it's really not about like right, wrong, good, bad, or whatever.
Right.
But a lot of people have referenced this. Many saints, sages, mystics, healers, teachers, they talk about the Akashic records. Do you want to explain to our listeners that aren't familiar with that, what that is?
Sure. It's kind of like, the history of the earth and places, as well as souls and beings, are stored in the Akasha, which are kind of this access. And I'm going to kind of put it in layman's terms. It's like a library that anyone and everyone has access to if you can kind of develop that muscle and your psychic abilities, because it's tuning into an energy where you're really kind of being an open vessel to receive information. So kind of, usually you say a prayer and you have to get permission from the beings that are kind of protecting the Akashic records. But, every place on the planet has them. Every soul on the planet has these records, and it's a stored, history of their soul's lifetimes in each and every lifetime and the experiences that are held. And so that's kind of stored in a memory bank. I like to think of it as a library that you're accessing, kind of that's somewhat, in the ethereal sky.
Mm-hmm. So, and I know everyone has differing beliefs about like past lives and reincarnation and pre-existence. And I've heard many, I would say most religious people don't believe in past lives, although my religion of origin taught a pre-existence, which is basically the same as past lives, because who knows how long that we were souls before we incarnated. Anyway, I'm way open. So I love to just talk about different ways of looking at our soul evolution. Like you said, what does it take for your soul to evolve? Like, what are you here to learn? You specifically, what are the lessons? But many people believe that we have multiple mortalities or multiple lives to teach us these things. Yeah.
And even, putting it in astrology terms, that's what the North Node and the South Node is here to teach us. And so I am an evolutionary astrologer, which means I look at the nodes of the moon, which has to do with, the South Node is our karma, which has to do with our past life of what we came in on, what we brought in, unfinished business from a past life. And, a lot of people maybe have a hard time, believing that or trusting that, but most people have there's a recognition when you feel like someone that you've never met, kind of that soul connection, that old soul, like, oh, I feel like I knew them in a past life. And it's like, where does that come from? And so in astrology, we have a North and South node in our chart, and it's in a specific house, which is an area of your life, but even more, it's in a sign. And so understanding that part of yourself, you can see your old patterns that you're attached to. It's like that comfort zone of where we can kind of keep playing out these scenarios that are not working for us. And so there's people that we kind of associate with those old patterns as well. And so it's learning to see them, acknowledge them so that we can release them and let them go. And then, moving towards kind of pointing you towards that North Node, which is your highest potential, which is that evolutionary growth, because it's a 180 from where you came from, what you mastered in a past life. And now the soul needs to learn to do the exact opposite. So a lot of people who feel unsure of what it is that they have to give in this lifetime, or what, whatever it is that their soul is being called to do. A lot of people are very confused about that. And I think, specifically even this year kind of brought that up for a lot of people of like, what is important? Am I happy in the work that I'm doing? Or do I have a different gift to kind of share with the world? And I think an understanding of the North Node, at least for me personally, gives that deeper understanding of what we each came in individually to share with the world, what those gifts are. Yeah. And so that just kind of puts you on this path of fulfilling your life's purpose.
So when you get your chart done, which I've always told my listeners, like, go get your chart done, because it's so helpful. It's just like a template for what you came here to learn, how you came, and like you were saying, the North Node. So for people that are unfamiliar with an astrological chart, it's just literally is in the north of your chart, right? It's the directional. It's
not necessarily in the north part of your chart.
Oh, okay.
It has to do with where the angles of the moon are.
Okay.
So depending on where your moon is, it's kind of the angles that are coming off of the moon.
Okay. So do you remember mine?
I don't remember. I'm sorry.
No, I kind of do too, but I just remember you saying that my North Node was with the father part of my.
Oh, because it was in the 10th house. That means it was in the 10th house, because the 10th house rules the father. So if your North Node is in your 10th house, that means you will be in the next lifetime, with the father. So you will have unfinished business from this lifetime that needs to be completed in the next lifetime. And it's almost like you're both in a place right now where one person's not willing to kind of complete that agreement. They're either not conscious enough, not open enough, not willing enough. And so a lot of times you have to, whatever it is, you kind of have to work out with that other soul. It needs to be completed created in that next lifetime. And the North Node is always at the opposite angle, the opposite sign and house, as you know, the South and North nodes are opposite from one another. So your South Node would actually be in the fourth house of the mother then. So
Yeah,
you
that's
had
right.
a most recent past lifetime with the mother. And so that's who you're kind of completing agreements with and contracts with in this lifetime.
Yeah, I can't remember if those were switched. I can't remember if the 10th house was the mother or the father, but or the North Node, sorry. I don't know if the North Node was 10th house or 4th house.
Right, right.
But yeah, but it's so interesting to me that, yeah, I think we have this conception that, like, you know, everything is just, I think sometimes people get this exception or this impression when they look at their chart, like it takes away their agency, or it takes away, it's like destiny, right? Versus, you know, I get to, you know, my soul chose this incarnation. My soul and God together, however you want to look at that, chose this exact constellation, if you will, of circumstances around me so that I could evolve, I could grow, I could learn, I could expand. And then if I have karma, which is, you hear about that a lot as like bad cosmic debt.
Yes.
Because you had unfinished business. Yeah, that when I looked at my whole chart, it was like, yep. You know, that's exactly, and like here I am halfway, kind of like at the halfway point of my life. I'm 51. I'm hoping to live to at least 100. You know, I can, because I know you teach about the Chiron wound, and when people get their charts done, they can see where that lives in their chart. They can see that wound that they came to experience and heal. And if you don't heal that wound, it will keep showing up until it gets addressed and acknowledged.
It's almost like it keeps being more and more magnified and expanded. And, you know, you recently just went through your Chiron because
it's called the dark night. It's like, tell everybody, I just had my dark night of soul.
Yeah. And that's the big, you know, there's 3 rites of passage that everyone goes through in a lifetime. And the first one is at 29. That's the Saturn return, which is a physical shift. It's when we, you know, get married, change careers, settle down, buy a house, have a baby, one of those things. And then the second one's at age 42, which is a mental shift, the Uranus opposition. And that's kind of the midlife crisis, actually. That's when a lot of people kind of, you know, make sudden drastic changes to their life because they're realizing they're not living the life that they want to live, you know? And so what do I need to do to shift for the next 42 years of my life so that I can live a fulfilled life in a way? But it's very much like a mental switch that you go through. And it's kind of just like looking at your life under a microscope saying, is this the life I wanted? And if not, what am I willing, you know, what changes do I need to enact? And then the last one, which is a spiritual shift, a spiritual change. And it is when a lot of people become more connected with a higher power, call it God, source, light, whatever you want to call it. But it's like it's that realization of kind of confronting our death, that we need to make peace with whatever, you know, dragons we have in the closet so that we can live, you know, or die in a more peaceful, graceful way, but not fear it, you know? So
what age is that one?
That's at age 50. So that's the one that
it's not long after the mental shift.
Yeah. So it's about 8 years later. And, you know, oftentimes it's when people do have, you know, it can be a spiritual awakening or it can be a spiritual crisis, just depending if you're doing the work or not.
Yeah, and sometimes those are not mutually exclusive, the awakening and the crisis.
Right. Usually they do happen together.
So what planet, because so the Saturn is at 29 years old, Uranus is at 42. What is the one?
And then Chiron. So Chiron is actually an asteroid, but it's called the wounded healer. And so that's where our big wound, which a lot of times it is something that we have brought in from a past life. Other times it can be just something that we did experience in early childhood. But basically it's the big thing that you came in that really needs to be healed and worked on, kind of for you to be able to, you know, either find that inner peace or find happiness. That's like the big piece that needs to be healed.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, the midlife crisis, the struggle is real. Like, there's a reason they call it that. So, okay. And then you also teach that there's certain days of the year. And okay, let's talk about the certain days of the year, the 8 days of the year that are really powerful for us.
Okay.
And then I want to talk about the rest of 2020 and what we have in store from what you're seeing. Yeah. So what are those potent days of the year?
So the 8 most potent days of the year, which would be the equinoxes, which happen every kind of like March 21st, 22nd, and then September around 21st, 22nd. And those are the perfect days of balance, the perfect days of light and dark, kind of marking that new season. And then also, the solstices, which December 21st, give or take a few days, and then also June 20th, 21st. And so that's like the day of the most darkness or the most light. So those are seen as the 4, kind of that change of season times. Mm-hmm. Those are the 4 most significant of, looking at the sun and moon. But when we look to the eclipses, so usually we have 4 eclipses a year, and they're spaced out every 6 months. So we have a new moon and a full moon eclipse about every 6 months. This past summer, we did have, or I guess it was kind of more in the springtime, we had 3 in a row. So those were pretty potent and powerful because it's not normal that we have 3 eclipses in a row. So that would have been 9 potent days of this year versus the 8. But usually, those eclipse times, which again, there's usually about 4 a year, and we're coming up on, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but what that eclipse season kind of brings for us. But November 30th, we have a full moon eclipse in Gemini. And then December 14th, we have a Sagittarius new moon eclipse. And so those eclipse energies are really ripe. They're like a triple full moon or a triple new moon. So they kind of harness, they're more of a magnified energy. Mm-hmm. So those are really powerful days. I always try to do a vision board on one of those days every year, or have a ceremony, something of like honoring where you are, some form of, giving thanks, having gratitude, some form of, just acknowledging where you've come, how far you've come. Mm-hmm. Always a good time for meditation, introspection. So I always kind of mark it with some sort of, ceremony to honor that day, because in that day holds so much power for manifestation, for setting intentions, for releasing of the old. So those are really potent times to kind of have, those gatherings with, your close kind of close-knit circle and honor it.
Yeah. I love sometimes going to the yoga studio. Oftentimes I'll do different kinds of sessions or, rituals. Rituals is a kind of a charged word for a lot of people, but all it really means is just celebration or more of an organized way of acknowledging. Yes. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, it's funny. My daughter was born on winter solstice. And
really?
Yeah. And so we always make that a little bit special for her. I've always felt like she almost named her Winter, and she's like, "Are you kidding me, Mom?" Like, she's born. Like, that would have been like the worst name for her ever, because she just doesn't have that vibe about her. So depressing. But we are like in 2020, like we are rounding out 2020. By the time this podcast episode airs in mid-November, we will be. Sorry, end of October. I have November on the brain right now because you just talked about.
I just talked about the eclipse.
Yeah, well, we're coming up on some really interesting stuff here. I mean,
yes, and it's not over yet. So I keep kind of telling people, they're like, "Oh, we're through this and we're, through that," and it's like, we're not done. It's pretty potent, literally through the end of December. So there is still more time for a lot of in a general sense, I'm going to, say it in a very kind of lightened way, but we're in a breaking down of the old systems, the old ways that are no longer working. And, as we can see, from government to banking to education to, pretty much all forms of how we structure, because they're all in Capricorn. So the big event that's happening this year is Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, all meeting together.
The trifecta that we talked about on episode 87.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. And so basically it's just like this buildup of structures of this old foundation that's it's almost like going through a demolition. Because it's needing to be rebuilt. And, we're feeling this energy of that big shift that kind of started with December 21st of 2012. And that's when we left the age of Pisces. We were in Pisces for 2000 years and we entered the age of Aquarius. So if you think back to all of those songs, the age of Aquarius, it's the age of enlightenment. It's the golden age. And for, people who kind of study astrology, Aquarius is linked with Uranus, which is the awakener, which is the revolutionary, which rules having breakthroughs. And actually, Aquarius is the ruler of astrology. So that's kind of this growing interest. I would say it really started in 2012 that people started becoming very attracted to. And it's kind of all forms of, let's say, this new age stuff, being more focused on meditation and acupuncture and herbs and these old kind of...
The ancient modalities.
The ancient modalities. It's almost like they're making a massive comeback as we enter, which we're still only beginning. This is a 2,000-year cycle, and we are 8.
Oh, heaven help us.
And so while I have not been feeling so much of that Aquarian energy, I feel like everyone will start to feel that shift happening in 2021. And that's because starting this December 19th, finally Saturn and Jupiter, are going to move. And actually on that day, on the 19th, which will be right before your daughter's birthday and the winter solstice, we have the meeting at 0 degrees, so at the beginning of the sign of Aquarius. And so Saturn will be in Aquarius for 2.5 years, kind of anchoring that Aquarian energy. And then we will also have Jupiter, which is usually in a sign for approximately 13 months. So all of 2021, Saturn and Jupiter will be in that sign of Aquarius. And so Jupiter rules our truths and our beliefs. And so Aquarius is very out of the box. It kind of breaks the mold. And so I see it as like, this is that energy that's ripe for finding solutions. And I think a lot of people are going to really start like seeing the truth and, changing their belief system of what maybe they thought was true before. But I just feel like it's going to be this huge opening. And then with Saturn there, Saturn's coming out of this heaviness of this earth energy of constriction, which is Capricorn, and breaking free, breaking the mold into this airy, kind of futuristic, visionary, ahead of its time. Like I always think of Albert Einstein when I think of Aquarius, because he was before his time. He kind of had these ideas that people probably thought he was crazy or completely out of it, but really he was a genius. He was brilliant, and he had the vision of what is possible. So I really believe that next year is going to be this profound breakthrough energy of being able to find the solutions to the problems that we have today. So I am very hopeful for what's to come.
That sounds cool. I think a lot of us have been feeling that, even though the vast majority of the people I talk to are not into astrology. They're all pretty much saying this.
Right. They're feeling it.
Intuitively, we feel it.
Yes, exactly. We feel it. And that's the whole thing with the as above, so below. Like we are more in tune than we would like to maybe some people acknowledge with what's going on, in the heavens and the stars. And it is that whole thing. It's like even just, coming in tune with the cycles of the moon and, what is going on with the cycles of the season. Like we feel that in our bodies and in our lives. And it is, everything everything operates on this planet. It's constant change, but it's a cycle of change. And so I think a lot of us are feeling that, and especially the ones that are more open and in tune with themselves.
Yeah. And just like we're talking about this happening on a planetary level, it's also happening within each individual. The structures that don't serve us, things we've built up in our bodies, the ways we believe, how we treat people, how we see life. Sometimes if those aren't serving the greater good, they will crumble within us.
Yes.
And it can feel very painful.
Yes.
Like, it's just like birth, you go through all the stages and you're waiting. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, just right up into the moment the baby's ready to be born, it's super painful. But then there's this release, this beautiful new creation is there. And it's like, oh, here's a new way. And that's Christ consciousness to me. That's the birth of the Christ consciousness. It's like, we all have to come into this Aquarian. I have a child born in 2012 as well. And I felt like it's just this is going to sound a little, woo, but I don't know, not to you, but maybe to some people. But when he came, the year he came, because, all that Mayan calendar was all about 2012. And there was, and then we kind of hit in the year 2000, people thought Y2K. And there's just been different times, in my lifetime where people are like, oh, this is a significant year. But I just intuitively felt that 2012, something shifted. And I was like, is it just me? And then I started talking to some more people and they're like, well, did you know about these prophecies and this calendar and all these things? And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. But if I can just, from my own vantage point, my own life cycle, it felt like something really shifted. And that was the year Eli came into our home through a separate, through a private adoption. And man, with him, I don't know what it is about this new era of children being born.
I think they're called the rainbow children.
Oh my, because I have like two sets of kids. So I have bio kids, and then I have a 12-year gap. And then I have these two younger children, and both of them are adopted. And I thought it was just because they're adopted, they're different. But I mean, talking to a lot of other parents who, this next generation, they really, everything that you're saying about, new innovation, new ways of doing things, breaking down old structures, like demolition.
Yes.
That's their energy.
They're hardwired with almost like a different DNA. They're just hardwired completely different than what we came in with. And each round of children being born are kind of in tune with the information that, it's like they're at our peak. And so they're coming in on this new information that they already have the answers to our problems. Like they're the ones that are going to solve, the climate crisis or, the trash crisis or whatever it is. They're already equipped. They came in on that energy with the solutions.
Because maybe they are such advanced souls that they, rose to a level of mastery in something. And then they just came in and like, well, let us show you we'll take it from here. Thank you. Like what you've done is not working.
And I've heard so many old souls are being reborn that are kind of, they're here at this time because we're at a very transitional point. And it is very much kind of like very high frequency beings coming in to kind of be the way showers.
Yeah, I can feel that and see that. So when we're talking about this age of Aquarius, and it kind of piggybacks on what you were just saying about way showers, because I know a lot of the listeners I have to this podcast consider themselves those who will be instrumental in helping other people to awaken. And they are probably in the process of awakening themselves. If not, when are you ever completely fully awake? But they're very conscious and have this, intuitive knowing that, they will be integral in, as way showers perhaps, or influencers, or maybe just in their small spheres of influence with their families, just guiding into this new way. And a lot of people are in fear about it. Mm-hmm. I see fear perpetuated all over. I think it's exciting.
And I think part of the reason that the fear is there, I mean, what do people fear the most? It's death. What has been brought up on a significant level, you know, with the whole pandemic, it is like fear of your own death. But, you know, what's underneath that, I think, is an invitation for us to clear it, to clear our fears. And so then when that's been cleared, what's underneath it? And it's just, I think a lot of people are coming into this place where they're like looking at themselves and there's nowhere to run and hide. So they're facing their fears, and there's a lot of energy of that happening this year, and a lot of kind of changes that are very abrupt and very unexpected and not predicted, but it's the unknown, you know, it's what is going to happen. And I think that can be something that does hold a lot of people back. And even I see that in astrology, some people are scared to know. And it's like, forewarned is forearmed. Don't you want to know the map? Don't you want to know when to act? Don't you want to know when, you know, you're being pushed in this direction because it's for your highest benefit and your highest potential? And so, you know, we're all as a collective kind of experiencing right now. And so many people are actually thriving during this time when other people's are feeling very stunted. And so it's like, where is that coming from? Is it an internalized kind of something that you've kind of created in your head and then it's playing out in front of you?
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much projection. And so so in November, we have something coming too. There's something in November. That's my sister's birthday, November 30th. Is there something crazy happening?
Oh, yes. Okay. So when your birthday is close to an eclipse, so that's when we have the Gemini full moon eclipse. And eclipse energy is so powerful because that's when they say the veils have opened, like the doorways, the portals are now open to the unseen worlds. So in a sense, eclipses bring out this time, which they can bring out confusion, but it's very much like a psychic and intuitive energy. And a lot of times it's like we can get messages, and it is a time to kind of go within and kind of find, you know, that quiet space or meditation, because you can get a lot of your answers during that time. But I see it as a quickening. It's like events can start to speed up and happen very rapidly, especially by that time. The only planet that we will have retrograde is Uranus. All the other planets will be direct. And so right now we have a whole slew of planets that are retrograde. And so that kind of holds you back. It's kind of like pulling back on the reins. And so there's just going to be this forward momentum that eclipses tend to bring out anyway, because it's kind of make events happen, you know, that may have taken a long time. It's like they can suddenly happen and manifest overnight. And so it kind of pushes you and catapults you forward in this new direction. And a lot of times it's in a very kind of challenging way, because it's like you didn't initiate that change yourself. It gets forced upon you. You know, It's kind of like getting that little cosmic push to kind of get you in the direction that you need to go. And then the door behind you slams and closes, and there's no going back to the old life. And so I actually love eclipse energy because while it can be a little chaotic and intense, it really gets the energy moving fast. And I don't know about you, but I've been feeling like we have been swimming through mud for quite some time now, ever since the pandemic hit. And, you know, around the end of April is when we had a lot of these major planets that formed this whole event that was happening this year, which is Pluto, Jupiter, and Saturn. They are all moving direct, by the end of October. So again, we have that forward momentum, and then with a lot of that quick energy of that eclipse kind of pushing us forward, I think that, you know, it's going to initiate a lot of breakthroughs.
That's cool. So I missed the date. So we got the two equinoxes, the two solstices. So we got September and
so it's
March.
kind of like every 3 months. So, you know, September.
So November 30th, December 14th, and then were there two other dates?
Yes, the two other ones happen about 6 months later. So we'll probably see the next round of eclipses start in May of 2021. And one thing I was going to tell you, since your sister's birthday is at eclipse time, the sun, her sun's going to be getting hit off by the eclipse. And so the sun is your identity. So there's something about her that's going to come. This is going to be a major year for her, specifically the next 6 months.
I'm going to tell her, Tanya, are you listening to this?
Major changes for her, especially when it comes to her identity, how she sees herself. When you strip off all the layers, and a deeper piece of that is, I think, connecting with the things that, what she is passionate about, what makes her heart sing, what her unique, gifts are to share in the world. And a lot of it has to do with self-expression. What is it that she wants and needs to express out into the world?
So interesting. Well, she and I are only 13 months apart, and, we've always been like huge deep dive truth seekers. And so she'll love to hear that. She'll love to hear that this is going to be an exciting creative year for her to be in her passion. She just got married, actually.
Oh,
so
congratulations.
yeah, she's really happy. It's a new era for her. Okay. So May, okay. So if the eclipses are typically November, December, May, or does it just vary by year?
It varies by year. So they're always about 6 months apart, but they're constantly kind of slowly a week or two kind of earlier than the year before. So each year they kind of start moving up.
I see. Awesome. So as we kind of round this out, because I know the whole thing with the retrogrades and the eclipses and these energies that are just so potent right now, what do you like, if you could crystal ball it, which I'm sure you've never heard that before, but if you could just like paint a picture of what you see happening, maybe within, I don't know how far you've looked ahead at charts, but I know you have a computer program. Most astrologers I know can look and kind of look ahead. But where do you see us in, like, let's just say the end of 2021? I know you're wearing your own set of lenses and perspectives about the world, but what do you see?
I think the major thing is a lot of solutions to the problems, a lot of very unique, out of the box, ways for us to address things like climate change and find a new way of being, a new way of living. And a lot of it comes from us, Uranus rules the higher mind. So looking at things at a more intellectual, philosophical, being able to be a little bit more open and expansive in order to be able to have these solutions that are ready to come in. But it's almost like, is society and the collective at large ready for it? And so that's kind of what these new children are kind of ushering in and bringing in. But I really believe that next year is a year of, solutions and resolutions and, being able to have all kinds of new discoveries. The scientific world is going to be blown off, like the roof's going to be blown off, because that kind of is that inventive energy, that Albert Einstein energy of Aquarius. So with both Saturn and Jupiter in that Aquarian energy, it's kind of like locking it in and bringing it in. And, Saturn's like, I want to see the results in the physical world. And Jupiter's like, let's go big. Let's magnify it. And, Jupiter does have to do with our truths and our beliefs, and we are going to see those changing in a major way as well. But, Saturn there, we're going to see the physical results of this, mind expansion.
That's so cool. I feel like innovation is kind of and it will have to happen organically, like with the people. I don't see it being like a top-down approach. Do you? I think it's just like, as a collective, we have to be able to receive it. Mm-hmm.
So it's like, I wouldn't say it's, one way or the other. It's just everyone has got to be open for it. be
Right.
ready for it. Not kind of saying, oh, I'm not going to do it that way. I want to do it the old way. And it's like the old way is now broken down. That's the whole demolition that's happening this year. It's being reconstructed. And this new way that is going to launch us forward is something that will be able to survive, and kind of keep this foundation for us for the next 50 to 100 years. But the old ways, that is not kind of in alignment for who we are, and what is needed for us to kind of keep moving forward and evolving.
Yeah. And I love that. I think it's just this, again, that's where it's at, is the it's kind of how we started this discussion. Like, how can we evolve? And any structure that doesn't support expansion, the dogma, the low vibration beliefs, the shaming factors, whether it's, schools, religions, governments, homes,
right,
families,
right.
It's all structures.
It's really everywhere. And so it's kind of like we're at that place where we're at the most constrictive point, which, even energetically, we're feeling it. So many people, not leaving their houses for so long, like that is the epitome of Saturn and Capricorn. And so with it kind of going through this breakthrough, freeing, revolutionary awakening, I mean, those are all the themes and enlightenment of Aquarius. So we are literally moving into the age of Aquarius, and we're there. And I feel like we are just now going to kind of see the roof blow off so that we can have this very, visionary. It's like looking into the future and seeing what needs to happen, but we have to look through it with new eyes that allow us to kind of be able to, it's almost like you have to, in order to solve a problem, you have to look at it from a different perspective. And I feel like that's what's coming. That's what we're going to be able to open up to and be able to receive. But before this moment in time, we were not ready.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Like, and I think that as more and more people organically wake up, then it'll be just self-evident what we need to do. And then it's like, well, how do we do this?
Yes.
Here's what needs to happen. This must happen.
Yes. And it's more of like a team effort and of everyone on board. And if you think about it too, in a larger scale, when we look at Aquarius, it's the humanitarian. So that is looking out for one another, and how do we kind of come at this as one, great big family of how can we support one another, and how can we support humanity as a whole?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, this is really insightful. Thank you. How can people find you, Tara? How can they get a session from you? I highly recommend it. Also, the sister team, the trifecta ladies, Mindy and Sarah, they still have their offer on the table, but how can people find you, and what, because you do more things other than,
yes.
astrology.
Well, I do astrology readings and tarot readings. And, a lot of times when I'm giving readings, I kind of open up the akasha of the other person to kind of receive more information from them. But
so fascinating.
Yes.
So fascinating.
But so I have an Instagram account, which is at Tara Jade Star. And then also you can go to my website, which is tarajadenichols.com, and you can sign up for a reading there, and also sign up for my newsletter where I put out the new moon and full moon kind of astrological updates. And then also you can get a lot of information about when I do promos and specials and that sort of thing for my readings.
Awesome. Wow. Okay. Well, listeners, like, it's time for you to know what's in the stars. Like, it's time for you to know, like, your wounds and your
highest potential, the
your
North
highest,
Node.
there we go. Your highest potential, because it is about you evolving. It's not about right or wrong, good, bad. It's about finding your potential and tapping into your purpose in life. And it's just one big tool to do that. It's just one more tool in your tool belt to be able to.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me, Sherry. It was really nice to talk with you again.
You too.
And connect with you. And I appreciate you having me on your podcast to connect with others.
Thanks, Tara. So I'd really encourage you to get your chart done. your astrological natal chart or birth chart. Just so helpful to see where your sun and moon are, where your ascendant is, what your north and south nodes are, just so you can know what your core wounds are and kind of what you're here to learn. And if you have a skilled astrologist, they will take you through that. It's not woo-woo, foo-foo, voodoo. It's just actually scientific. It's inexplicable that when you're born and where you're born and what time you're born have a bearing on kind of your path here in this life. And so I love it. It's just more and more peek into the dimensions of who you are, and can be super helpful to stay grounded and aligned in the knowledge of, you're here to learn and you're here to grow and expand. And all of these things that we experience and all of these shifts happening both within and around us are serving a higher purpose. And just remember that nothing is ever predestined. You always have the freedom and the capacity to take your life on whatever trajectory you want. Knowing that you have that sovereignty and that freedom over your own life domain, and that you're the master and commander of your own existence in connection with Creator and Source and universal love. So just wanted to leave you with that very empowering thought as we head into really uncertain times in this world. Doesn't matter what you're going through, you can have that inner equanimity and stay aligned and balanced in your own right. So have a glorious weekend. Again, remember to join me on the Women Seeking Wholeness private Facebook group that you have to ask to join, and we will get you in the know of the prizes and cool stuff we have coming up as we launch episode 100. Thank you so much for listening. Please share with your friends, and please be so kind as to leave me a review on iTunes. We will talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.